People like you don't belong at Westbridge. Not unless you earn it honestly. Dr. Winter's words cut through the classroom as she accused Marcus of cheating on an algorithm no student could possibly develop. But why was Marcus always standing in class? What painful secret was he hiding from his prestigious university? And how could a brilliant black student from the South Side prove his innocence when the system had failed him before? When an elite professor publicly humiliates a student, she never expected the shocking truth that would turn her accusations upside down. What happens when prejudice blinds us to true brilliance? Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The advanced algorithm classroom at Westbridge University buzzed with anticipation as Dr. Eleanor Winter strode in, her designer heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Her gaze swept across the room with practiced authority, landing on Marcus Johnson, who stood at the back of the classroom. "Mr. Johnson," she called out, her voice crisp with annoyance. "Class has begun. Please take your seat." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I prefer to stand, Professor. If that's all right." Dr. Winter's lips thinned into a tight line. "This is a university, not a subway station. Sit down." A flush crept up Marcus's neck as 30 pairs of eyes turned to stare. "I'm sorry, Professor, but I really need to sit down." Each word dropped like a stone. Marcus reluctantly lowered himself into a chair, his face contorting briefly with pain before he masked it. Aidan Walsh, the son of a tech mogul, shot him a concerned glance from across the aisle. 50 minutes of agony followed as Marcus shifted constantly in his seat. When class ended, he was the first to stand, relief washing over his features. A week later, Dr. Winters projected the latest assignment results on the screen. "Most of you disappointed me with your brute force solutions." However, her gaze fixed on Marcus with sudden intensity. One submission was suspiciously elegant. She pulled up Marcus's code. "Mr. Johnson has somehow produced an algorithm that outperforms even the textbook solution. Care to explain how you managed this breakthrough when you can't even follow basic classroom etiquette?" Marcus stood straighter. "I found an optimization that—" "Save it," Dr. Winters cut him off. "I've been teaching this course for 15 years. No student has ever developed this solution independently." Her voice rose, addressing the entire classroom now. "This is clearly plagiarized from research not yet published to the public." The classroom fell silent. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. "I've initiated academic dishonesty proceedings," Dr. Winters continued coldly. "The committee will determine your punishment." As students filed out, whispers trailing in their wake, Aidan approached Marcus. "That was completely unfair. You're the smartest coder in this program." But Marcus barely heard him, the professor's words echoing in his mind, "People like you don't belong at Westbridge. Not unless you earn it honestly." Marcus's hands trembled as he unlocked the door to his family's modest two-bedroom apartment. The familiar scent of his mother's lemon cleaning spray usually brought comfort, but today nothing could ease the humiliation burning in his chest. "You're home early," his father Terence called from the kitchen, where he was preparing dinner after his bus driving shift. When Marcus didn't respond, Terence appeared in the hallway, dish towel in hand. One look at his son's face told him everything. What happened? Marcus collapsed onto the couch, the only place besides his bed where he could find relief. "My professor accused me of cheating. In front of everyone." Terence sat beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Start from the beginning." As Marcus recounted the day's events, his mother Olivia arrived home in her nurse's scrubs, exhaustion lining her face until concern replaced it. "Your back was bothering you again, wasn't it? And you didn't tell the professor why you needed to stand?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm not using that as an excuse." "It's not an excuse, it's a medical condition," Olivia insisted. The memory surfaced unbidden, Ms. Stone's classroom 3 years ago. Marcus had corrected an error in the physics textbook, and the teacher's face had twisted with rage at being challenged by a student. "Think you're smarter than everyone, don't you?" she'd hissed, forcing him to stay after class. What happened next still haunted him. The classroom empty, Ms. Stone had ordered him to bend over her desk for old-fashioned discipline. The wooden paddle had cracked against him with such force that Marcus had needed medical attention. The official story became that he'd fallen during basketball practice. The school had dismissed his parents' complaints. Ms. Stone was tenured, respected. Marcus was just another black kid labeled as problematic for being too outspoken. The injury had healed improperly, leaving him with chronic pain that flared whenever he sat for too long. "You need to tell them," Terrence urged. "This isn't just about the cheating accusation now." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus opened it to find a girl with curly hair and determined eyes. "Zoe Parker, Westbridge Gazette," she introduced herself. "I heard what happened in Dr. Winters' class. I don't believe you cheated, and I want to help prove it." Marcus hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Zoe's expression hardened. "Because this isn't the first time Dr. Winters has targeted a student of color. And I'm thinking it's time someone exposed the pattern." Dr. Eleanor Winters strode into Dean Richard Blackwell's office without knocking, a folder tucked under her arm. "Richard, I've prepared the academic dishonesty paperwork for Marcus Johnson." Dean Blackwell, a man whose silver hair and tailored suits projected authority tempered with diplomacy, gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Eleanor, this is the third case you've brought forward this semester." "Standards are slipping," she replied, smoothing her silk blouse. "My family didn't endow the Winters Computer Science building for mediocrity to flourish." The dean sighed. "The committee will need conclusive evidence. His algorithm solution is impossible for an undergraduate. I've consulted with colleagues at MIT who agree." She neglected to mention those colleagues were former classmates who hadn't even reviewed the code. Dr. Samuel Brooks, the department chair, entered carrying his own stack of papers. His presence seemed to irritate Dr. Winters, whose smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Samuel," Dean Blackwell nodded. "I asked Dr. Brooks to join us since this falls under his department." Dr. Brooks adjusted his glasses. "I've reviewed Mr. Johnson's academic record. Straight A's since freshman year, exceptional performance in all programming courses. Which makes this betrayal of academic integrity all the more disappointing," Dr. Winters interjected. "Or," Dr. Brooks countered, "suggests we should consider the possibility that he's simply exceptional." The dean raised a hand to prevent the brewing argument. "The hearing is scheduled for next week. We'll follow protocol." As they discussed logistics, Katie Williams, Dr. Winters' teaching assistant, waited nervously outside. When the meeting ended, she approached Dr. Brooks in the hallway. "Dr. Brooks? I need to speak with you about Marcus Johnson." He guided her to his office, closing the door. "What's troubling you, Katie?" "It's about the cheating accusation," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus has submitted brilliant work all semester. His coding style is consistent, distinctive, even. I don't believe he plagiarized anything." "That's a serious position to take against your supervising professor." Katie nodded. "I know. But I've seen Marcus work through problems during lab hours. He thinks differently, sees patterns others miss." She hesitated. "And there's something else. Marcus always stands during lab sessions. When I asked why, he just said sitting was uncomfortable. Now he's being punished for not sitting in lectures, too." Dr. Brooks frowned. "Dr. Winters hasn't mentioned any accommodations request." "That's just it, there isn't one. But 2 students told me Marcus was in obvious pain after Tuesday's lecture. He'd finally sat down after Dr. Winters repeatedly demanded it." In the campus courtyard, 2 computer science students watched Dr. Winters exit the administration building. "Marcus is done for," one whispered. "Nobody wins against Winters." "My cousin had her last year," the other replied. "Said she made 3 black students drop the course by midterm." always finding issues with their work. Well, her family practically owns this place. Who's going to stop her? Neither noticed Zoe Parker sitting nearby, recording every word on her phone, her expression growing more determined by the second. Marcus paced the small study room in the university library, his fingers drumming against his thigh. They've scheduled the hearing for next Friday. 1 week to prove I didn't cheat. Zoe spread her notes across the table. Then we build your defense methodically. First, we need your coding history, everything that shows you're developing skills. Aidan Walsh leaned against the wall, his designer clothes contrasting with the utilitarian room. My father knows people on the board. One call could. No, Marcus interrupted firmly. I don't want special treatment. I want to clear my name on merit. Aidan nodded, respecting the boundary despite his instinct to leverage his family's influence. Then let's focus on the algorithm itself. Can you walk us through your thought process? As Marcus explained his approach, sketching diagrams on the whiteboard, Zoe recorded everything. His passion became evident. The elegant solution hadn't come from plagiarism but from genuine understanding. You're thinking multidimensionally, said a new voice from the doorway. Dr. James Chen, known for his groundbreaking work in computational theory, stood watching with interest. Ms. Parker invited me. Hope you don't mind. Marcus faltered. Dr. Chen. You teach the graduate seminar on advanced algorithms. And you solved a problem my doctoral students struggle with. He examined Marcus's diagrams. Your approach reminds me of Katherine Johnson's work at NASA, seeing mathematical relationships others miss. He turned to Marcus. May I review your previous assignments? While Marcus retrieved his work, Zoe questioned Dr. Chen. Will your assessment help at the hearing? Academic integrity cases require evidence. If Marcus demonstrates consistent brilliance and a unique problem-solving style, it undermines the plagiarism claim. When Marcus returned, Dr. Chen spent an hour reviewing his assignments, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Finally, he looked up. You've developed a distinctive approach to algorithm optimization. I'd recognize your code even without your name on it. Hope flickered in Marcus's eyes. You believe me? Intelligence isn't confined to expected packages, despite what some colleagues think, Dr. Chen said carefully. I'll prepare a formal assessment for the hearing. After Dr. Chen left, Aidan received a text message. His expression darkened. My study group says Dr. Winters is building her case. She's pressuring students to testify they never saw you working on the assignment. Marcus slumped against the wall, pain shooting through his back. Zoe noticed his grimace. You need to tell them about your injury. And look like I'm making excuses. Playing for sympathy. It's relevant, she insisted. She forced you to sit knowing it caused you pain, then used your standing as evidence of disrespect to bolster her accusation. Marcus closed his eyes. The truth felt like another vulnerability to expose. But as the pain throbbed along his spine, he realized he might have no choice. In Marcus's childhood bedroom, Zoe stared in amazement at the sophisticated computer setup tucked into the corner. 3 monitors displayed lines of code, a small server hummed efficiently, and technical books filled a salvaged bookshelf. You built all this yourself? She asked, examining the custom-modified components. Marcus nodded, tension easing from his shoulders in this safe space. Started with a broken laptop Dad rescued from the transit authorities lost and found. Permission to keep it after 6 months unclaimed. Terrence Johnson appeared in the doorway, pride evident in his stance. Found him at 3 a.m., 11 years old, watching coding tutorials and taking notes like a college student. He chuckled. Knew then he was headed somewhere special. Dad exaggerates, Marcus said, but his small smile revealed the story's truth. Zoe opened Marcus's laptop. Show me your GitHub. His profile revealed 7 years of continuous contribution, thousands of commits, dozens of projects, and contributions to open-source initiatives. What began as simple programs evolved into sophisticated applications, demonstrating clear progression of skill. This is your proof, Zoe declared. No one develops this coding fingerprint overnight. Dr. Winters would have to argue you've been planning this deception since you were 13. Check his CloudNet profile too, Terrence suggested. Marcus reluctantly opened the site, revealing his username, ShadowCoder92. Zoe's eyes widened. Wait, you're ShadowCoder? You developed that scheduling algorithm that nonprofit organizations use? You know it? The Campus Volunteer Center coordinates everything with your system. You never told anyone it was yours. Marcus shrugged. It's just something I built for Mom's hospital when their commercial software kept crashing. Other places started using it. Terrence shook his head. My son, the humble genius. Tell her about the recognition. Dad. 2 years ago, Terrence continued despite Marcus's discomfort, a tech magazine wanted to profile him as a rising star. Marcus declined when they asked for professional headshots. They'd see a black teenager from the South Side and suddenly question if it was really my work, Marcus explained quietly. I wanted the code to speak for itself. Zoe's fingers flew across her keyboard. This changes everything. We have concrete evidence of your capabilities developing over years. She looked up, determination hardening her features. We're going to win this, Marcus. For the first time since the accusation, Marcus allowed himself to believe it might be possible. The university conference room had been arranged like a courtroom. A long table at the front seated Dean Blackwell at the center, flanked by Dr. Brooks and 3 other faculty members. Dr. Winters sat at a table to the right, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that radiated authority. Marcus, Zoe, and Katie Williams occupied the table to the left. The room filled with observers, professors, students, and administrators drawn by campus rumors. Aiden slipped into a seat directly behind Marcus, offering a supportive nod. Dean Blackwell called the room to order. We're here to address allegations of academic dishonesty against Marcus Johnson. Dr. Winters, please present your case. Dr. Winters approached a podium with practiced confidence. When evaluating student work, experienced educators develop intuition about what represents authentic student achievement versus fraudulent submission. She displayed Marcus's algorithm alongside published research papers. Mr. Johnson's solution bears suspicious similarity to cutting-edge research, yet implements optimizations that even the original authors haven't discovered. She clicked to a new slide showing Marcus standing in the back of her classroom. Mr. Johnson consistently demonstrates disregard for classroom policies, refusing to follow basic instructions. This pattern of behavior extends to his academic submissions, where he disregards ethical standards for personal gain. Marcus clenched his jaw as whispers rippled through the audience. The statistical probability of an undergraduate student, particularly one with Mr. Johnson's disadvantaged background, independently developing this algorithm approaches 0. The evidence supports only one conclusion: plagiarism. She returned to her seat with a satisfied expression. Dean Blackwell nodded. Mr. Johnson, your response. Marcus rose, standing straight despite the pain radiating through his lower back. He felt every eye in the room assessing him, judging whether he belonged at Westbridge. I wrote every line of that algorithm myself, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I've been coding since I was 11 years old. My GitHub history documents my development as a programmer, showing consistent growth in precisely the skills needed to create this solution. Zoe distributed packets containing Marcus's coding history, ShadowCoder profile, and Dr. Chen's analysis. Marcus walked the committee through his thought process, explaining how each element of his solution built upon concepts he'd been exploring for years. Dr. Winters interrupted. This elaborate backstory doesn't explain the sophistication of the final algorithm. No amount of childhood tinkering bridges that gap. With all due respect, Dr. Winters, Marcus countered, your assumption that my disadvantaged background precludes exceptional achievement reveals more about your biases than my capabilities. A murmur swept through the room. Dean Blackwell's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. Katie Williams stepped forward next, nervously adjusting her glasses. As Dr. Winter's teaching assistant, I've observed Marcus's work all semester. His programming style is distinctive and consistent, the disputed algorithm matches his established patterns perfectly. Dr. Winters's expression darkened. Ms. Williams, your graduate funding depends on departmental approval. Consider carefully whose interests you're serving. Is that a threat, Dr. Winters? Dr. Brooks interjected, his tone deceptively mild. The hearing continued for another hour, tension mounting as testimonies contradicted one another. Throughout it all, Marcus remained standing, shifting his weight occasionally to manage his pain. Finally, Dean Blackwell noticed. Mr. Johnson, you've been standing this entire time. Would you prefer to sit? Before Marcus could answer, Dr. Winters scoffed. Another demonstration of his defiance. Actually, Marcus said quietly, I cannot sit for extended periods due to a medical condition. The revelation hung in the air, unexpected and weighty. Dean Blackwell frowned. Our records show no accommodation request filed with Disability Services. Because I never filed one, Marcus admitted. But it's relevant to Dr. Winter's characterization of my classroom behavior as disrespect. The dean studied Marcus thoughtfully. This committee will deliberate and reconvene in 3 days. In the meantime, I request Mr. Johnson's medical records and Dr. Chen's complete assessment of the algorithm in question. As the room cleared, Aiden squeezed Marcus's shoulder. You held your ground. But was it enough? Marcus wondered, watching Dr. Winters conferring with the dean, her expression unreadable. Olivia Johnson sat rigidly in Dean Blackwell's office, her nurse's scrubs exchanged for her only business suit, medical records organized in a folder on her lap. Marcus stood beside her while Dr. Chen waited nearby, his presence a silent support. Mrs. Johnson, thank you for coming, Dean Blackwell said, gesturing toward the chairs. I understand you have information relevant to your son's situation. Yes, Olivia replied, her voice carrying the quiet strength developed through years of advocacy for her patients. 3 years ago, Marcus suffered a severe injury that damaged the sacroiliac joint in his lower back. She handed over medical documentation, X-rays, specialist consultations, and treatment plans. The injury causes chronic pain when sitting for extended periods. Standing alleviates the pressure. Dean Blackwell reviewed the records, his expression growing troubled. These indicate trauma consistent with significant force application. He looked up sharply. How did this happen? Marcus and Olivia exchanged glances. This was the moment they discussed, whether to reveal the full truth. My high school physics teacher, Ms. Veronica Stone, struck me repeatedly with a wooden paddle as punishment for correcting a textbook error, Marcus said quietly. The school administrators dismissed our complaint, suggesting I was exaggerating and had actually been injured playing basketball. The dean's face reflected genuine shock. This is unconscionable. Why wasn't this reported to police? We did file a report, Olivia explained, her composure slipping momentarily. The investigation went nowhere. Ms. Stone was a respected teacher with 20 years tenure. Marcus was a black student already labeled as having attitude problems for questioning authority. Dr. Chen spoke up. Dean Blackwell, while this abuse is horrifying, it also contextualizes Marcus's reluctance to request accommodations at Westbridge. Students who faced institutional betrayal often avoid systems designed theoretically to protect them. The dean nodded slowly. Mr. Johnson, why didn't you simply tell Dr. Winters about your condition? Because I wanted to be judged solely on my academic merits, Marcus answered. Not as someone needing special treatment or exceptions. And honestly, I feared it would be used against me somehow, that explaining my need to stand would be twisted into another excuse to question my abilities. Which is precisely what happened, Dr. Chen noted. His physical accommodation need became Dr. Winters' evidence of disrespect, which she then used to bolster her plagiarism accusation. Dean Blackwell frowned, turning to another document. Dr. Chen, your analysis of Marcus's algorithm concludes it's not only original but potentially publishable. Correct. Marcus's solution reveals a natural mathematical intuition I rarely encounter even among doctoral candidates. What Dr. Winters interpreted as evidence of cheating is actually innovation. The dean studied Marcus with new understanding. You've been fighting battles on multiple fronts, Mr. Johnson. I'm beginning to see why you chose not to share your medical history. He closed the folder decisively. This information changes the nature of our investigation. I'll need to speak with Dr. Brooks immediately. As they left the office, Olivia squeezed Marcus's hand. This isn't just about clearing your name anymore, she whispered. This is about making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to someone else. Marcus nodded, realizing the truth in her words. His personal vindication had become something larger, a challenge to the systems that had failed him repeatedly. The hallways of Southside High School hadn't changed in the 3 years since Marcus had graduated. The same scuffed linoleum floors, the same flickering fluorescent lights, the same sense of institutional indifference. Zoe Parker walked confidently beside Terrence Johnson, her press badge prominently displayed. The principal agreed to meet us because I said I was writing a feature on distinguished alumni. Which isn't entirely false. Marcus will be distinguished once we clear his name. Terrence's expression remained serious. Are you sure this is necessary? Stirring up the past. We need to establish a pattern, Zoe explained as they approached the administrative offices. Ms. Stone's history of abuse contextualizes Marcus's reluctance to disclose his injury at Westbridge. Principal Davis welcomed them with practiced cordiality that faded when Zoe revealed their true purpose. Ms. Stone is one of our longest-serving faculty members. These allegations were investigated and dismissed years ago. Then you won't mind providing those investigation records, Zoe countered smoothly. For thoroughness. Those records are confidential personnel matters. Terrence leaned forward. My son's medical records aren't confidential to me. I have documentation of severe spinal trauma consistent with the beating he described. Trauma your investigation attributed to a basketball injury despite Marcus not even being on the team. Principal Davis's smile thinned. Mr. Johnson, our school has procedures. Procedures that protected an abusive teacher while dismissing a black student's pain, Terrence interrupted, years of contained anger finally surfacing. I followed your procedures. Filed complaints with the district, the school board, even the Department of Education. Every time, Ms. Stone's version was accepted without question. Zoe placed a folder on the desk. I've identified 3 other former students with similar experiences. 2 were students of color. None reported their injuries because they saw what happened when Marcus did. She let that sink in. This isn't just a story about academic integrity at Westbridge anymore. It's about systemic failure across educational institutions. Principal Davis's composure cracked. What exactly do you want? Access to Ms. Stone's disciplinary record, interviews with staff who worked here during Marcus's enrollment, and a statement from you acknowledging the inadequacy of the original investigation, Zoe replied without hesitation. Impossible. The liability alone would be significant, Terrence finished. Especially when the university newspaper runs its exposé next week, followed inevitably by mainstream media. Principal Davis stared at them, calculating risks and outcomes. Finally, he pressed his intercom. Cancel my next appointment and pull Veronica Stone's personnel file. 30 minutes later, they had what they needed, a pattern of complaints systematically minimized, witnesses who'd been discouraged from speaking up, and a school administration more concerned with reputation than student welfare. Their final stop was Ms. Stone's classroom. The physics teacher looked up from her desk, recognition and then alarm crossing her face when she saw Terrence. You have no right to be here, she snapped, reaching for her phone. We've just come from Principal Davis's office, Zoe said calmly. He's expecting your call. Ms. Stone's hand froze. Whatever that boy told you, that boy is now a brilliant university student whose career you nearly destroyed, Terrence interrupted. Not just with what you did to his body, but with what you taught him about justice, that there isn't any for people who look like him. He was disruptive, disrespectful. He was right, Terrence countered. The textbook error he identified was confirmed by the publisher, who issued a correction the following year. Ms. Stone's expression hardened into defensive contempt. Some students need firm discipline to reach their potential. Is that what you call assault now? Firm discipline? Zoe asked, recording the conversation discreetly. You have no proof of anything. Actually, Zoe replied, we have everything, medical records, witness statements from other victims, and now your own words revealing your utter lack of remorse. She stepped closer. Marcus Johnson isn't just going to clear his name at Westbridge. He's going to ensure you never hurt another student again. As they left, Terence exhaled shakily. I've waited 3 years to see fear in that woman's eyes, the same fear my son felt in her classroom. Zoe squeezed his arm gently. This isn't just about vengeance. It's about accountability. And tomorrow, we bring all of this to Dean Blackwell. The computer science department's conference room had been transformed into a makeshift research lab. 3 large monitors displayed different sections of Marcus's algorithm, while printouts of his previous projects covered the table. Dr. Chen moved between displays, occasionally making annotations while Dr. Brooks observed thoughtfully. The elegance is in its simplicity, Dr. Chen explained, highlighting a specific segment of code. Where traditional approaches use recursive functions requiring exponential processing time, Marcus identified a mathematical pattern allowing linear computation. Aiden, who had insisted on being present as moral support, whispered to Marcus, "Is that good?" Marcus nodded. It's the difference between a program running for days versus minutes on complex data sets. Dr. Brooks studied a timeline of Marcus's coding project stretching back to his early teens. The progression is remarkable. Each project builds logically upon skills developed in previous work. If this were plagiarism, we'd see sudden, unexplained leaps in capability. The door opened as Katie Williams entered with another stack of papers. I found Marcus's preliminary notes from the algorithm lab sessions. She spread them across the table, pages of handwritten calculations and half-formed code snippets. He was working through these concepts weeks before the assignment was due. Dr. Chen compared the notes to the final algorithm. These match perfectly, early variations of the same approach, gradually refined. This is authentic intellectual development, not plagiarism. Dr. Brooks removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Eleanor Winters has made a grievous error in judgment, to put it charitably. Or a deliberate one, Aiden said quietly, placing his laptop on the table. I've been analyzing Dr. Winters' grading patterns for the past 5 semesters. He turned the screen to show a spreadsheet. Students of color receive significantly lower grades on subjective assessments like design elegance or code creativity, areas where clear rubrics typically don't exist. Dr. Brooks frowned. Where did you get this data? I'm a teaching assistant for the registrar's office, Aiden explained. I have legitimate access to anonymized grade distributions. I only connected them to demographic data after Marcus's case arose. Dr. Chen studied the analysis. This pattern is statistically significant. Have there been other academic dishonesty allegations? 7 in the past 3 years, Aiden confirmed. All against minority students. 4 cases were dismissed, but 3 students withdrew from the university before hearings concluded. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about one algorithm or one student anymore. We need to proceed carefully, Dr. Brooks finally said. These allegations against a tenured professor require substantial evidence. Which we now have, Dr. Chen replied, gesturing to the comprehensive analysis on the monitors. Marcus's code isn't just legitimate, it's exceptional. Any qualified reviewer would recognize its authenticity. Marcus, who had remained quiet throughout the analysis, finally spoke. This isn't just about clearing my name anymore, is it? Dr. Brooks shook his head. No, Mr. Johnson. Your case has exposed concerns that extend beyond a single accusation. The question now is how the university responds, not just to your situation, but to the potential pattern it represents. As they gathered their evidence for the final hearing, 2 more computer science students arrived at the doorway. "We heard you're analyzing Marcus's work," one said hesitantly. "We want to testify too. Dr. Winters has been systematically undermining minority students for years. It's time someone stood up to her." Marcus met their eyes, recognizing the same determination that had driven him to fight rather than withdraw. "The hearing is tomorrow. Are you sure you want to get involved?" The students nodded in unison. "We're sure." For the first time since the accusation, Marcus allowed himself a genuine smile. What had begun as a personal battle for vindication had transformed into something more significant, a challenge to the institutional biases that had affected countless students before him. "Then let's get your statements on record," Dr. Chen said, making room at the table. "Tomorrow will be a reckoning long overdue." The Westbridge Gazette special edition hit campus like a thunderbolt. Zoe's headline blazed across the front page: "Algorithmic Bias, How Academic Accusations Target Minority Students." Below it, a striking photo of Marcus standing proudly beside his code, his expression resolute. Students clustered around every available copy, conversations buzzing across courtyards and cafeterias. The article meticulously documented Marcus's case, complete with expert testimonials from Dr. Chen and statistical analyses of Dr. Winters' grading patterns. But most powerfully, it connected Marcus's current struggle to his past trauma, exposing how educational institutions had repeatedly failed him. By noon, social media had amplified the story beyond campus. Alumni were calling the administration demanding action. Local news vans parked at the university entrance, reporters seeking comments about the allegations of institutional racism. In the university president's office, Dean Blackwell faced increasingly uncomfortable questions. "This should have been handled quietly," President Harrington snapped, tossing the newspaper onto her desk. "Now we have a public relations crisis." "With respect, Madam President, the quiet handling of such cases is precisely what allowed the pattern to persist," Dean Blackwell replied. "The evidence against Dr. Winters is substantial and troubling. She's from one of our most generous donor families. Which may explain why previous complaints were dismissed so readily." The president's assistant interrupted with an urgent message: the Winters Foundation was threatening to withdraw funding over the "slanderous accusations" against Eleanor. Meanwhile, in the student center, Marcus found himself surrounded by supporters, many of whom he'd never met. "Your algorithm is brilliant," gushed a graduate student. "I've been reviewing it since the Gazette published the code repository link. The optimization technique could revolutionize our departmental research." Another student, her voice shaking with emotion, simply said, "Thank you for fighting. I nearly dropped out after Dr. Winters tore apart my project last semester." Dr. Brooks arrived, navigating through the crowd. "Mr. Johnson, the hearing has been moved to the main auditorium due to overwhelming interest. Also, the provost and president will be attending." "Is that good or bad?" Marcus asked quietly. "Unprecedented," Dr. Brooks answered. "And a sign that the administration recognizes this case has implications beyond your individual situation." Across campus, Dr. Winters stalked into her department office, her usually perfect composure fractured by fury. "This defamation will not stand. That girl reporter and her melodramatic exposé is backed by statistical evidence and multiple testimonials," Dr. Chen interrupted, looking up from the paper. "The truth isn't defamation, Eleanor. You've always resented my family's influence," she hissed. "This is your opportunity to undermine me, using some underprivileged student as your pawn." Dr. Chen's expression hardened. "That pawn developed an algorithm that senior researchers would envy. Your inability to recognize exceptional talent when it doesn't match your preconceptions is what brought us here." "The hearing will vindicate me," she insisted, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. By evening, the story had reached national news outlets. Opinion pieces discussed the broader implications of bias in STEM education, while industry leaders questioned whether Westbridge's prestigious computer science program was failing to nurture diverse talent. In their modest apartment, the Johnson family gathered around their small television, watching in disbelief as Marcus's story became the centerpiece of a national conversation. "I never wanted this much attention," Marcus said, overwhelmed by the rapidly escalating situation. His father squeezed his shoulder. Sometimes our personal battles become something bigger than ourselves. You stood your ground not just for your own dignity, but for everyone who couldn't fight back. On his phone, messages poured in from students across the country sharing similar experiences, brilliant minds who had been discouraged, dismissed, or driven out of academic programs by professors who couldn't see past their biases. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Olivia said softly, "you've already won something important. You've broken the silence." Marcus nodded, resolute determination replacing his anxiety. Tomorrow wouldn't just determine his academic future, it would challenge an entire system that had failed too many for too long. The university auditorium hummed with tension as hundreds gathered for the reconvened hearing. Every seat was filled, with students lining the walls and campus security maintaining order at the entrances. At the front, an expanded panel now included the university president, provost, and several board members alongside the original committee. Marcus stood at the respondents' table, flanked by Zoe, Dr. Chen, and his parents. The support bolstered him as he faced Dr. Winters across the room, her usual confidence visibly strained despite her immaculate appearance. President Harrington called the hearing to order. Given the extraordinary public interest in this case and the broader allegations it has raised, the board has authorized an expanded proceeding. We will first conclude the academic dishonesty charge against Mr. Johnson, then address the systemic concerns identified in recent days. Dean Blackwell stood. Since our last session, substantial new evidence has been provided. Dr. Chen will present the technical analysis of Mr. Johnson's algorithm. Dr. Chen approached the podium with quiet authority. For 20 minutes, he methodically dismantled the plagiarism accusation, presenting irrefutable evidence of Marcus's coding evolution and the authentic development of his algorithm. His conclusion left no room for doubt: Marcus Johnson's work represents original, innovative thinking consistent with his established capabilities. Next came testimony from Katie and two other teaching assistants, who confirmed the pattern of bias in Dr. Winters' grading practices. Then Zoe presented her findings about Marcus's high school experience, connecting it directly to his reluctance to seek accommodations at Westbridge. Throughout it all, Dr. Winters sat rigidly, her expression increasingly strained as her case collapsed. When finally called to respond, she approached the podium with practiced dignity. "My concern has always been maintaining Westbridge's exceptional standards," she began. "If my methods appear stringent, it's because excellence demands rigor. As for Mr. Johnson's algorithm, I maintain that its sophistication exceeds what could reasonably be expected from an undergraduate student without significant outside assistance." Marcus rose. "May I address that point directly?" The president nodded, and Marcus moved to the central podium. Pain radiated through his back after hours of standing, but his voice remained steady. "Dr. Winters' fundamental assumption is that someone like me, black, from a working-class background, educated in underfunded public schools, couldn't possibly develop advanced computational skills independently." He pulled up his algorithm on the projection screen. "But let me walk you through exactly how I developed this solution, step by step." For the next 15 minutes, Marcus demonstrated his thought process with such clarity and confidence that even technical non-experts could follow his reasoning. He explained how years of self-teaching and countless hours of practice had developed his unique approach to problem-solving. What Dr. Winters interpreted as evidence of cheating is actually the result of learning differently than she expected. Not having access to expensive resources meant finding creative solutions. Not fitting the profile of a typical computer science prodigy meant developing my talents in isolation, without recognition or encouragement. He turned to face Dr. Winters directly. "Your accusation wasn't based on evidence, but on your inability to believe someone like me could be exceptional. That prejudice, not my integrity, is what should be questioned here today." The auditorium erupted in applause. Dr. Winters attempted to interject, but her objections were lost in the overwhelming support for Marcus. When order was restored, President Harrington addressed the room. "This hearing has uncovered concerns that extend far beyond one academic dishonesty case. The university must examine its practices to ensure all students have equal opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities without prejudgment." She turned to Marcus. Mr. Johnson, the evidence conclusively refutes the accusation against you. Your record will reflect complete exoneration, with a formal apology from this institution. For Marcus, the words he had fought so hard to hear now felt like just the beginning of a much larger victory. The spring sun bathed Westbridge's central quad in golden light as Marcus crossed the stage to thunderous applause. Dean Blackwell shook his hand firmly while presenting the university's prestigious Innovation Award, an honor usually reserved for graduate students. For exceptional contribution to algorithmic theory and demonstration of outstanding academic integrity, the dean announced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. 3 months had passed since the hearing that had transformed both Marcus's life and the university itself. The changes had come swiftly. Dr. Winters had been placed on administrative leave pending a comprehensive review of her grading practices. The university had established a task force on academic equity, with Marcus invited as a student representative. Most significantly for Marcus personally, Westbridge had overhauled its disability accommodation procedures to make them more accessible and less stigmatizing. As he accepted the award, Marcus caught sight of his parents in the front row. His father's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, while his mother's face radiated the quiet pride of someone who had always believed in her child's potential, even when systems failed to recognize it. "Thank you," Marcus said into the microphone, his voice steady. "This recognition belongs not just to me, but to everyone who supported me through this challenge." He scanned the audience, acknowledging Zoe, whose journalism had exposed the truth, Aiden, whose friendship had never wavered, Dr. Chen, who had validated his talents, and the many students who had come forward with their own stories after his case made headlines. "True education isn't just about algorithms or theories," Marcus continued. "It's about creating environments where every student can thrive, where excellence is recognized regardless of what package it comes in." The crowd rose in a standing ovation as Marcus returned to his seat. President Harrington approached the podium next, announcing the establishment of the Johnson Equity Scholarship, a new program supporting talented students from underrepresented backgrounds pursuing computer science. After the ceremony, as congratulations flowed from all directions, Dr. Brooks pulled Marcus aside. "I have news you might find interesting. 3 technology companies have contacted the department about your algorithm. They're interested in implementation rights, and in offering you internships." Marcus smiled. "I'll need to review their diversity and inclusion practices before deciding." "As you should," Dr. Brooks agreed. "Oh, and Ms. Stone has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Your case created ripples beyond Westbridge." Later, surrounded by family and friends at a celebration dinner, Marcus finally allowed himself to fully absorb his vindication. The path forward wasn't without challenges. His back pain remained a daily reality, and changing entrenched systems would require ongoing vigilance. But something fundamental had shifted, both within him and within the institutions that had once failed him. To Marcus, Terence raised his glass in a toast. "Who taught us all that standing up, both literally and figuratively, is sometimes the only way forward." As laughter and love filled the room, Marcus realized that his algorithm had solved more than just a computational problem. It had created an equation for justice that might help others navigate the complex variables of institutional bias and emerge with their brilliance intact and recognized. The truth had indeed shocked everyone, and in that shock, created space for genuine change. Dear friend, this story highlights how systemic bias creates barriers for talented students from underrepresented backgrounds. Educational institutions must recognize that brilliance comes in all forms and from all communities. By challenging our assumptions about what excellence looks like, we create space for all students to thrive. Everyone deserves to be judged on their merits, not prejudged by appearance or background. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that sparks important conversations about equity, justice, and recognizing potential in unexpected places. Together, we can build a more inclusive future. Have you ever wondered what would happen if someone tried to publicly humiliate you, only to discover you're a genius at the very thing they mocked? I don't care what you say, Principal Simmons. No teacher should ever hit a student. Ever. When history teacher Dr. Sarah Johnson stood up against abusive disciplinary practices, she never expected to become a target herself. But when the principal challenged her to solve an impossible math problem to embarrass her in front of the entire faculty, he had no idea who he was really dealing with. What happens next will leave you speechless. Watch the full story to discover how one brave teacher's hidden talents changed everything for a school trapped in outdated traditions. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Dr. Sarah Johnson took a deep breath as she stood before the imposing brick facade of Westridge High School. Today marked her first day as the school's newest history teacher, a significant career pivot that few in her life understood. With her shoulders squared and her natural curls framing her face, she clutched her worn leather messenger bag and walked through the main entrance. "You must be Dr. Johnson," a voice called out. An older white woman with a tight smile approached. "I'm Gladys from the front office. Principal Simmons asked me to show you to your classroom." As they walked down the bustling hallway, Sarah noticed the curious glances from both students and teachers. She was used to being scrutinized, being one of the few black women in her previous field had prepared her for that. "History department is down this way," Gladys explained. "Most of our teachers have been here for decades, so a new face is quite the event." Sarah nodded politely. "I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. Principal Simmons runs a tight ship here," Gladys continued as they approached a conference room. "Speaking of which, there's a brief faculty meeting before classes start." Inside, about 20 teachers were already seated. At the head of the table stood Principal Walter Simmons, a stout man with thinning gray hair and an expensive-looking suit that strained slightly at the buttons. "Ah, our new addition," Principal Simmons announced, his tone somewhere between welcoming and dismissive. "Dr. Johnson will be taking over world history following Mr. Peterson's retirement." Sarah smiled, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you all." Principal Simmons gave her hand a quick shake before continuing. "Dr. Johnson comes to us from, remind me again. It wasn't a high school, was it?" "No, I was previously in academia," Sarah replied evenly. What she didn't mention was her PhD in mathematics from MIT, or her years as a research mathematician. After losing her brother, a passionate history professor, in a car accident 2 years ago, Sarah had made the difficult decision to change careers, honoring his memory by teaching the subject he had loved. "Well," Principal Simmons said with a tight smile, "teaching high school is quite different from university lectures. Our students need structure, discipline, and consistency." An older white man at the table nodded vigorously. "These kids today need firm boundaries. Don't let them walk all over you because you're new." Sarah maintained her composure. "I believe in creating an engaging learning environment that respects students as individuals." A few teachers nodded approvingly, but she noticed others exchange skeptical glances. "Yes, well," Principal Simmons cleared his throat, "we'll see how that approach works with our student body. Now, let's move on to this semester's testing schedule." As the meeting progressed, Sarah observed the dynamics among her new colleagues. Most seemed dedicated but tired, while a few appeared genuinely enthusiastic about teaching. She also couldn't help but notice she was one of only 3 black faculty members in the room. When the meeting concluded, a younger teacher approached her. "Don't mind the old guard," she whispered. "Some of these folks haven't changed their lesson plans since the 90s. I'm Emily, by the way. I teach English." "Nice to meet you, Emily," Sarah replied with genuine warmth. "Any advice for my first day?" Emily glanced around before leaning closer. "Just be yourself. The kids can smell fear and fakeness." Sarah laughed. "Noted." As the bell rang, signaling the start of first period, Sarah made her way to room 237. Standing at the doorway, she welcomed each student with a smile and a "good morning." Some returned her greeting enthusiastically, others mumbled responses, and a few averted their eyes completely. This was a new chapter in her life, one she hadn't planned but now embraced fully. While mathematics had been her first love, history had become her second act. And despite Principal Simmons' obvious doubts, Sarah was determined to make it count. Sarah's first week at Westridge High had been a whirlwind of learning names, establishing classroom routines, and navigating the school's politics. By Friday, she was beginning to feel more settled, until she noticed something unusual in her fourth-period world history class. A tall, lanky boy stood at the back of the classroom, leaning against the wall with his notebook balanced in one hand. While the other students sat at their desks, he remained standing, jotting down notes occasionally. When the bell rang and students began filing out, Sarah approached him. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I've noticed you standing during class all week. Is everything all right?" The boy, James Cooper, according to her roster, stiffened. "I'm taking notes, ma'am. I'm paying attention." "I can see that, James. Your participation has been excellent. I'm just wondering why you don't sit down." She kept her tone conversational, non-accusatory. James shifted uncomfortably. "I'm fine standing, Ms. Johnson." "Dr. Johnson," she corrected kindly. "But you can call me Ms. J if that's easier." She paused, studying his face. "Is there a reason you can't sit?" James looked at the floor, then around the room, as if checking whether anyone else might hear. "I have back pain," he finally admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, concern evident in her expression. "I'm sorry to hear that. Have you seen the school nurse? Is there anything I can do to help?" The boy's shoulders tensed further. "No nurses. No doctors. It'll go away." Something in his tone alarmed Sarah. This wasn't the typical adolescent avoidance of medical attention. "James, if you're in pain, you should." "Ms. J, I gotta get to my next class," he interrupted, already backing toward the door. "Wait," Sarah said. "If standing is more comfortable for you, that's absolutely fine. I just want to make sure you're okay." James hesitated in the doorway. "Thanks," he mumbled before disappearing into the hallway. The following Monday, Sarah kept a closer eye on James. He arrived early, taking his now usual position at the back wall. As other students filtered in, she noticed several of them glancing at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to what looked like sympathy. During a small group activity, Sarah circulated the room until she reached James, who was working alongside two other students who had brought their chairs to the back to accommodate him. "How are you doing today, James?" she asked quietly. "Fine, Ms. J," he replied without looking up. "Your back still bothering you?" His pencil stilled. "It's better." Sarah considered her next words carefully. "You know, as your teacher, if there's something affecting your ability to learn comfortably, I'd like to help." One of the other students in the group, a girl with braided hair, gave James a meaningful look that Sarah caught. "It's nothing," James insisted. After class, Sarah was surprised when the girl with braids, Zoe Williams, approached her desk. "Dr. Johnson?" "About James?" "Yes." Sarah straightened, setting aside the papers she'd been organizing. "It's not really my place, but..." Zoe bit her lip. "He's standing because he can't sit down. Ms. Hartley hit him with a ruler last week. Like, really hard." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Ms. Hartley? The biology teacher?" Zoe nodded. James was laughing at something his friend said. She got mad and told him to come to the front. Then she made him bend over and... Zoe trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "It happens a lot with her." "She physically struck him?" Sarah clarified, struggling to keep her voice level. "Yeah. Some of the older teachers still do that. Principal Simmons says it's traditional discipline. Most kids just take it, but James got it really bad. That's why he can't sit." Sarah thanked Zoe for the information, her mind racing. Corporal punishment had been outlawed in their state years ago. This wasn't traditional, it was illegal. The next day, Sarah approached James before class. "I'd like to speak with you privately for a moment," she said. Once the room had emptied, Sarah spoke frankly. "James, I've heard about what happened with Ms. Hartley. I want you to know that what she did was wrong, and against school policy." James looked up, surprise and fear flashing across his face. "Who told you?" "That's not important. What matters is that no teacher should ever hit a student. Ever." "It doesn't matter," James muttered. "Nobody cares. Principal Simmons knows all about it." "I care," Sarah said firmly. "And what's happening isn't right. I can help you report this." James shook his head vehemently. "No way. It'll just make things worse. Ms. Hartley will find out I told, and Principal Simmons always takes the teacher's side." Sarah recognized the resignation in his voice. She'd heard it before from people who had learned that speaking up against injustice often carried consequences. "For now, you're welcome to stand in my class for as long as you need to," she assured him. "But James, this isn't over. No one has the right to hurt you." As James left, Sarah sat at her desk, a familiar determination taking root. She might be new to teaching history, but she was no stranger to standing up against systems that protected the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. 3 weeks into the semester, Sarah was hitting her stride. Her classroom had become a space of unexpected energy and engagement, something that drew both curiosity and scrutiny from her colleagues. "Today, we're looking at population shifts during the Industrial Revolution," Sarah announced to her third-period class. Instead of relying solely on the textbook's dry account, she had prepared something different. "I need 6 volunteers," she said, and hands shot up across the room. She selected students and positioned them at different points around the classroom. "Each of you represents a city. The distance between you roughly corresponds to actual geography." She handed each student a stack of index cards. "These represent population. Now, as I narrate events from 1750 to 1850, you'll exchange cards based on migration patterns." As the simulation progressed, students could visually track how rural populations emptied into urban centers. By the activity's end, the student representing London was practically buried in index cards. "Now," Sarah said, moving to the whiteboard, "let's look at this mathematically." She quickly sketched a coordinate plane. "If we plot population over time, we can identify patterns that explain historical shifts more precisely than just saying lots of people moved." She drew elegant curves, explaining how exponential growth models applied to historical population booms. "History isn't just names and dates," she explained. "It's patterns, trends, and the mathematics of human behavior over time." The students, even those who typically slumped in their seats, were engaged, asking questions about both the historical events and the mathematical concepts she'd introduced. From his spot at the back wall, James raised his hand. "Dr. J, is this why London had all those cholera outbreaks? Because the population growth outpaced the city's capacity?" "Excellent connection, James." Sarah beamed. "The mathematical concept of carrying capacity absolutely applies here. When population density exceeds infrastructure capability," she stopped mid-sentence, noticing Principal Simmons standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "Continue, Dr. Johnson," he said with a tight smile. "Don't let me interrupt your mathematics lesson." Sarah smoothly redirected, "As I was saying, these population shifts fundamentally changed social structures throughout Europe. Let's return to page 127 in your textbooks to examine the political consequences." After class, Principal Simmons lingered. "Interesting approach, Dr. Johnson. Though I must say, your history class seemed to have wandered into Mr. Peterson's old math territory." "I believe in cross-disciplinary teaching," Sarah replied. "Mathematical concepts help students understand historical patterns more concretely. Our curriculum is designed to be taught as distinct subjects for a reason," he countered. "Students need clear boundaries between disciplines. Besides, I'm not sure all that theatrical movement was necessary. Research shows that kinesthetic learning increases retention by up to 40%, Sarah said. And students who understand the mathematical underpinnings of historical trends perform better on standardized tests. Principal Simmons frowned. Your enthusiasm is noted. But at Westridge, we value traditional teaching methods that have proven successful over decades. Traditional doesn't always mean optimal, Sarah responded evenly. The principal's face tightened. Dr. Johnson, as a new teacher here, I'd advise caution about challenging established practices too quickly. Focus on teaching history, leave mathematics to the math department. After he departed, Sarah sat at her desk, frustrated but undeterred. During lunch, she was surprised when Emily, the English teacher she'd met on her first day, slipped into her classroom. Heard Simmons paid you a visit, Emily said, placing a coffee on Sarah's desk. The hallway gossip machine works fast. Sarah sighed. Apparently teaching history through a mathematical lens is controversial. Anything that wakes these kids up is controversial to Walter, Emily replied. But fair warning, Miss Hartley has been complaining about you in the teacher's lounge. Miss Hartley? What did I do to her? Emily lowered her voice. Word is that students are asking why your class is engaging while hers is, sit down and shut up. Plus, rumor has it you've been asking questions about her disciplinary methods. Sarah's jaw tightened. You mean her illegal corporal punishment? Shoo. Emily glanced nervously at the door. Look, I agree with you, but Hartley's been here 20 years and has Simmons wrapped around her finger. She calls it traditional values. There's nothing valuable about hitting children, Sarah said firmly. I'm with you, Emily assured her. Just, be careful. Simmons protects the old guard, and they're already calling you the disruptive element in our faculty ecosystem. Later that week, Sarah introduced another innovation. She divided her ancient civilizations class into groups, assigning each a different empire, Roman, Mayan, Chinese, and Egyptian. Your task is to analyze why these civilizations rose and fell, she explained. But with a twist, I want you to identify the mathematical and economic principles at work. She circulated as students worked, stopping at James's group, which was tackling the Maya. We're looking at their calendar system, James explained, animated in a way Sarah hadn't seen before. It was super advanced, and totally based on mathematics. They predicted astronomical events centuries in advance. Excellent observation, Sarah praised. And how did mathematical advancement intersect with their political structure? As James's group delved deeper, Sarah noticed he had actually pulled up a chair, though he perched carefully on its edge to avoid putting pressure on his still-healing bruises. By Friday, the classroom buzz around Sarah's teaching methods had spread throughout the student body. When she entered the teacher's lounge to make a cup of tea, conversation stopped abruptly. Ms. Hartley, a tall, severe woman in her 50s, shot her a cold glare. Dr. Johnson, Ms. Hartley said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, I understand you've been teaching mathematics in your history class. Perhaps you're confused about your subject assignment. Several teachers chuckled. Actually, Sarah replied calmly, I'm teaching historical analysis through multiple lenses, including mathematical modeling. Students seemed to respond positively to understanding the why behind historical events. In my 20 years of teaching, Ms. Hartley countered, I've found students respond best to clear authority and structured learning. All this innovative teaching just confuses them about expectations. Sarah smiled. Different approaches work for different learners. That's the beauty of educational diversity. As she turned to leave, Ms. Hartley added loudly, of course, when they fail the state exams because they were playing games instead of learning facts, I'm sure your diversity will be a great comfort. Sarah paused at the door. My students' performance will speak for itself, she said, then walked out, her head high but her heart racing. That afternoon, as students filtered into her final class of the day, Sarah noticed James enter with something she hadn't seen before, a small smile. He still stood at the back, but his posture was different, more engaged. Education shouldn't be a battlefield, Sarah thought. But if that's what it had become at Westridge High, she was prepared for the fight. Principal Walter Simmons prided himself on running Westridge High like a well-oiled machine. For 15 years, he had maintained order through unwavering adherence to tradition and hierarchy. So when Ms. Hartley stormed into his office one Tuesday morning, he immediately sensed a disruption to his carefully balanced system. "Walter, we need to talk about Dr. Johnson," Ms. Hartley declared, settling her angular frame into the chair across from his desk without waiting for an invitation. Principal Simmons sighed, removing his reading glasses. "What has our new history teacher done now, Patricia?" "She's undermining the disciplinary structure of this entire school," Ms. Hartley said, her thin lips pressing into an even thinner line. "Students from my biology classes are asking why they can't move around or use math in my lessons like they do in Dr. Johnson's class." "Her methods are certainly unconventional," Simmons acknowledged. "It's more than that," Ms. Hartley insisted. "She's questioning my classroom management techniques to students. Jason Miller told me that Dr. Johnson said my disciplinary methods were outdated and inappropriate." Principal Simmons frowned. It was one thing for a new teacher to experiment with teaching styles, it was quite another to criticize established faculty members to students. "There's also the matter of James Cooper," Ms. Hartley continued, lowering her voice. "He was properly disciplined last month for disrupting my class, and now he stands during Dr. Johnson's lessons because she's encouraged him to do so. It's blatant undermining of authority." Principal Simmons drummed his fingers on his mahogany desk. The Cooper boy had always been trouble, too smart for his own good and not respectful enough of traditional boundaries. If Dr. Johnson was encouraging such behavior, "I'll speak with her," he promised. "Westridge has standards, and while we welcome new faculty, they must adapt to our culture, not the other way around." Later that day, he summoned Sarah to his office during her planning period. She arrived promptly, her posture straight and professional despite the obvious tension. "Dr. Johnson," he began, "it has come to my attention that your teaching methods continue to diverge from our established curriculum." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "My students are engaged and learning, Principal Simmons. Their quiz scores have improved 15% in just 3 weeks. Test scores aren't everything," he countered, though this information annoyed him. "There are concerns about classroom management and professional courtesy." "I'm not sure I understand," Sarah replied, though her slightly narrowed eyes suggested otherwise. "Several faculty members have expressed concern that you're encouraging students to question established teaching methods," he said, leaning forward. "Particularly regarding discipline." Sarah didn't flinch. "If you're referring to corporal punishment, I should point out that it's illegal in our state." Principal Simmons felt heat rise to his face. "Dr. Johnson, at Westridge, we have traditional methods of maintaining order that have served us well for decades. What you call corporal punishment, we call structured consequences. Hitting students with rulers isn't a structured consequence, it's assault," Sarah said, her voice level but intense. "And allowing a student to stand in class because they're in pain from being struck by another teacher isn't undermining authority, it's basic human decency." "You're new here," Principal Simmons said, his voice hardening. "You don't understand our community or its values. Parents send their children to Westridge because we maintain discipline and respect for authority." "Respect should be earned, not enforced through fear," Sarah replied. Principal Simmons stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Dr. Johnson, consider this a formal warning. Your teaching methods must align with our established curriculum, and you will cease encouraging students to disregard other teachers' authority. Is that clear?" Sarah rose as well. "What's clear is that I'm being asked to ignore abusive behavior toward students. I cannot and will not do that." As she turned to leave, Principal Simmons called after her, "This isn't some progressive university, Dr. Johnson. If you can't adapt to how we do things at Westridge, perhaps this isn't the right fit for you." The confrontation with Principal Simmons left Sarah shaken but resolute. As she walked back to her classroom, she noticed James Cooper sitting alone in the hallway outside the guidance office. "Everything okay, James?" she asked, pausing. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face. "Ms. J." "Yeah, just waiting to see Mr. Daniels about my schedule. Sarah hesitated, then decided to be direct. James, I just had a meeting with Principal Simmons about Ms. Hartley's disciplinary methods. I want you to know I didn't mention you by name. James's expression darkened. Doesn't matter. They won't do anything about it anyway. I'm not giving up, Sarah assured him. Why do you care so much? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Most teachers just look the other way. Sarah considered her answer carefully. Because education should be about lifting students up, not breaking them down. And because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, especially young people still figuring out who they are. For a moment, James's tough exterior softened. Thanks, Ms. J. But be careful. They run things their way here, and they don't like people who rock the boat. As Sarah continued to her classroom, a familiar determination settled over her. She hadn't left a prestigious mathematics career just to become another cog in a broken system. If standing up for students meant making waves, then she was prepared to create a tsunami. The monthly faculty meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in the school library. Sarah arrived early, selecting a seat at the large oval table where she could observe everyone's reactions. As other teachers filtered in, she noted the subtle division forming, younger faculty members offering her friendly smiles, while the more established teachers clustered around Ms. Hartley, occasionally glancing in her direction with barely concealed disapproval. Principal Simmons arrived precisely at 3:30, setting his leather portfolio on the table with a decisive thump. Let's begin, he announced, adjusting his tie. First item, the upcoming state assessments. For 30 minutes, the meeting proceeded with routine updates and administrative announcements. Sarah contributed where appropriate but remained primarily observant, studying the dynamics at play. When Principal Simmons finally said, "Any other business," she knew her moment had come. "Yes," Sarah said, raising her hand. "I'd like to discuss our school's disciplinary policies." The room fell silent. Principal Simmons's jaw tightened visibly. "Our policies are clearly outlined in the faculty handbook, Dr. Johnson." "I've read the handbook," Sarah replied evenly. "It states that Westridge High adheres to all state educational regulations. Yet I've observed practices that directly violate state law regarding corporal punishment." Ms. Hartley's face flushed crimson. "If you have specific concerns about my classroom, Dr. Johnson, professional courtesy would suggest addressing them privately rather than ambushing colleagues in a meeting." "This isn't about any one teacher," Sarah clarified, though everyone knew otherwise. "It's about establishing a safe learning environment for all students. Several students have reported being physically struck as punishment. One student is still suffering physical pain weeks later." "That's an exaggeration," Ms. Hartley snapped. Emily, the English teacher, unexpectedly spoke up. "Actually, I've noticed the same student standing in my class too. He said sitting is too painful." Principal Simmons raised his hand for silence. "This is not the appropriate forum for unsubstantiated accusations. If there are specific incidents that concern you, there are proper channels to address them." "I've tried the proper channels," Sarah responded. "I came to you directly, Principal Simmons, and was told these were traditional methods that I didn't understand." Several of the younger teachers exchanged glances. One of them, a math teacher named Mr. Abernathy, cleared his throat. "Perhaps it's time we revisited some of these traditions. Research consistently shows physical punishment decreases academic performance and increases behavioral problems." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "And from a purely pragmatic perspective, these practices expose the school to significant legal liability." Ms. Hartley slammed her hand on the table. "This is absurd. We're talking about reasonable discipline that parents support. You're making it sound like we're abusing children." "Striking a child with an object hard enough to cause lasting pain meets the legal definition of abuse," Sarah stated firmly. The tension in the room was palpable. Principal Simmons, clearly sensing he was losing control of the meeting, intervened. "That's quite enough. Dr. Johnson, your concerns have been noted. I'll schedule a separate meeting with the disciplinary committee to review our policies. Now, let's move on to next month's testing schedule. As the meeting concluded, the faculty divided into buzzing groups. Sarah gathered her materials, aware that she had likely made powerful enemies but equally certain she had done the right thing. As she headed for the door, Mr. Abernathy stopped her. "That took courage," he said quietly. "Not many new teachers would risk their position like that." "Some things are worth the risk," Sarah replied. "I admire that," he said. "By the way, I've heard great things about how you're integrating math into your history lessons. If you're interested, our math team could use some help. The regional competition is coming up, and our coach, Mrs. Patel, is on maternity leave." Sarah smiled, genuinely surprised by the offer. "I'd be happy to help." As she left the building, Sarah noticed Principal Simmons and Ms. Hartley in intense conversation in the parking lot. When they spotted her, they abruptly fell silent, watching as she walked to her car. The battle lines had been drawn. Sarah had forced a conversation many had been avoiding for years. Now she would face the consequences, for better or worse. 2 weeks after the contentious faculty meeting, Sarah was grading papers in her classroom when a tentative knock interrupted her concentration. Looking up, she was surprised to see James Cooper and 3 other students hovering in the doorway. "Ms. J, can we talk to you for a minute?" James asked. "Of course," Sarah replied, setting aside her work. "What's up?" A girl stepped forward, Sophia Chen, one of Sarah's brightest students. "We're on the math team, and we heard you might be helping us since Mrs. Patel is on maternity leave." "Mr. Abernathy mentioned it," Sarah confirmed. "I'd be happy to support the team." "The thing is," James explained, "we've been practicing, but we're stuck on some of the advanced calculus problems from last year's competition. Mr. Abernathy is great, but his specialty is geometry, not calculus," Sophia finished. "And the regional competition is in 3 weeks." Sarah smiled. "I might be able to help with that. When do you usually practice?" "Mondays and Wednesdays after school," another boy, Devin, replied. "But Principal Simmons has to approve any faculty advisor changes, and he's been hesitant." Sarah understood the unspoken message. After the faculty meeting confrontation, Principal Simmons had been coldly professional toward her, nothing overtly hostile, but clearly communicating his disapproval. "Leave it to me," she assured them. "I'll speak with him." The following morning, Sarah knocked on Principal Simmons's office door, steeling herself for another difficult conversation. "Dr. Johnson," he greeted her without warmth. "How can I help you?" "I understand the math team needs additional coaching for the regional competition," she began. "I'd like to volunteer my time to help them prepare." Principal Simmons leaned back in his chair, studying her with evident skepticism. "The math team? I wasn't aware you had qualifications in that area. You were hired to teach history." Sarah maintained her composure. "Before transitioning to history education, I had extensive background in mathematics. I believe I could be an asset to the team, particularly with the calculus portions of the competition." "This is highly irregular," he said, frowning. "Mr. Abernathy is already working with them." "As a supplement to his coaching, not a replacement," Sarah clarified. "The students themselves approached me for help." Principal Simmons's expression suggested he found this hard to believe. "I'm not comfortable having a history teacher coaching our math team. It sends a confusing message about faculty roles and expertise." "With all due respect," Sarah countered, "shouldn't our priority be providing students with the best possible preparation? This is about their success, not rigid departmental boundaries." Before he could respond, his phone rang. After a brief conversation, he hung up with a sigh. That was Superintendent Roberts. "Apparently, several students on the math team have emailed her office requesting that you be allowed to help coach them." His expression darkened. "I don't appreciate being undermined, Dr. Johnson." "I had nothing to do with that," Sarah said truthfully, though she couldn't suppress a small smile at the students' initiative. After a long pause, Principal Simmons relented. Fine. You may assist Mr. Abernathy twice weekly until the competition. But make no mistake, this is temporary, and you are still primarily a history teacher. I expect your regular classes to remain your priority. Of course, Sarah agreed, rising to leave. Thank you for your flexibility. That afternoon, Sarah met with the math team for the first time officially. 8 students, including James and Sophia, waited eagerly in Mr. Abernathy's classroom. Thanks for coming, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Abernathy greeted her warmly. The team is excited to work with you. I'm happy to help, Sarah replied, setting down her bag. Why don't we start by looking at some of those challenging problems you mentioned? For the next hour, Sarah guided the students through complex calculus concepts with an ease that clearly impressed them. She broke down difficult problems into manageable steps, connecting abstract mathematical ideas to concrete applications. That makes so much more sense now, James exclaimed after successfully working through a particularly challenging integral. The way you explained it, it's like I can see the pattern clearly. Mathematics is all about patterns, Sarah responded. Just like history. Both disciplines are about recognizing the underlying structures that shape events, whether those events involve numbers or human actions. As the session concluded, Mr. Abernathy pulled Sarah aside. I have to say, I'm impressed. Your grasp of higher-level mathematics is exceptional for someone whose background is in history. Sarah merely smiled. I've always found the subjects complementary. Over the next 2 weeks, word spread about Sarah's mathematical prowess. Students from other classes began asking if they could sit in on the math team practices, just to watch her work through problems. The team members themselves showed remarkable improvement, tackling increasingly difficult concepts with growing confidence. Principal Simmons observed one session silently from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Though he said nothing directly to Sarah, she later overheard him telling the superintendent on the phone that the unconventional arrangement appeared to be working adequately. 3 days before the regional competition, disaster struck. Mr. Abernathy came down with severe bronchitis and was ordered by his doctor to rest for at least a week. You'll have to take the team to the competition, he told Sarah during a phone call. They trust you, and you know the material better than anyone else available. When Sarah approached Principal Simmons with this development, his response was predictably resistant. This is getting out of hand, he said, shaking his head. You were supposed to be assisting, not taking over. It's an emergency situation, Sarah pointed out. The students have worked too hard to miss this opportunity. After a tense standoff, Principal Simmons grudgingly agreed, but with a warning, don't make a habit of stepping outside your designated role, Dr. Johnson. History teachers teach history. Math teachers teach math. That's how successful schools maintain order and consistency. As Sarah left his office, she wondered what Principal Simmons would say if he knew just how qualified she actually was to lead that math team. But that revelation, she decided, could wait for another day. For now, her focus was on helping her students succeed, in both history and mathematics. The regional math competition had exceeded all expectations. Westridge High's team, under Sarah's guidance, had placed second overall, their best showing in over a decade. James Cooper had even won an individual medal in the calculus category, a first for the school. Upon their return, the math team was greeted with enthusiasm from fellow students and most faculty members. Principal Simmons, however, remained conspicuously reserved in his congratulations, offering only a brief, well done, before quickly changing the subject to the upcoming standardized testing schedule. A week after the competition, Sarah was summoned to an unscheduled faculty meeting. As she entered the conference room, she immediately sensed tension in the air. Principal Simmons sat at the head of the table, flanked by Ms. Hartley and several other senior teachers. The math team's trophy had been placed prominently at the center of the table, a visual reminder of their recent success. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Principal Simmons began. As you know, our math team performed admirably at regionals. This success has prompted some suggestions regarding our academic approach moving forward. Ms. Hartley's expression soured as Principal Simmons continued. Superintendent Roberts has expressed interest in what she calls cross-disciplinary teaching methods, specifically citing Dr. Johnson's dual role as history teacher and math team coach. Sarah felt all eyes turned toward her. While I appreciate the superintendent's enthusiasm, Principal Simmons continued, his tone making clear he appreciated no such thing, I have concerns about blurring departmental boundaries. Excellence comes from specialization and focus, not from diluting our expertise across multiple subjects. Sarah couldn't remain silent. With respect, Principal Simmons, research consistently shows that cross-disciplinary approaches enhance student engagement and deepen understanding. Our students' recent success demonstrates that. Ms. Hartley scoffed. One competition doesn't invalidate decades of established educational practice. Actually, Mr. Abernathy interjected, the math team's performance wasn't just good, it was their best in 12 years. Whatever Dr. Johnson did clearly worked. Principal Simmons's jaw tightened. The question isn't whether Dr. Johnson helped the team, it's whether her approach is sustainable and appropriate for our school structure. Why wouldn't it be? Sarah asked. If students benefit, because, Principal Simmons interrupted, it creates confusion about faculty roles and expertise. Students need to understand that teachers have specific qualifications in their assigned subjects. Sarah felt a familiar frustration rising. Students also need to understand that knowledge isn't confined to neat boxes. Mathematics informs history, science influences art, the real world is interdisciplinary. That's a lovely sentiment, Ms. Hartley said with exaggerated patience, but concrete expertise matters. I wouldn't presume to teach calculus any more than a math teacher should attempt to teach advanced biology. Yet you seem quite comfortable offering opinions on history education despite having no background in it, Sarah pointed out. The room fell silent. Principal Simmons's face flushed as he struggled to regain control of the meeting. Let's be practical about this, he said, his voice strained with forced reasonableness. Dr. Johnson, while your assistance during an emergency situation was appreciated, your primary responsibility remains teaching history. The math department will manage its own affairs moving forward. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Principal Simmons wasn't finished. His next words carried an unmistakable edge of challenge. After all, helping students prepare for a competition is one thing. Having the depth of mathematical knowledge required for serious academic instruction is quite another. The implied dismissal of her abilities stung, but Sarah maintained her composure. I believe I've demonstrated sufficient mathematical competence to be of value to our students. Principal Simmons smiled thinly. Have you? Coaching students through prepared competition problems is hardly the same as mastering advanced mathematical concepts. Something in his tone, the smug certainty that she was out of her depth, finally broke Sarah's patience. What exactly would qualify as sufficient demonstration of mathematical competence, Principal Simmons? The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. The other teachers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the conversation had moved beyond professional disagreement into personal territory. Principal Simmons seemed to welcome the confrontation. With deliberate movements, he stood and walked to the whiteboard that spanned the conference room wall. Picking up a marker, he began writing a complex differential equation. This, he announced, is part of the advanced placement calculus curriculum that Mr. Abernathy teaches to our top seniors. Understanding such concepts requires years of specialized mathematical training. He stepped back, a satisfied expression on his face as he surveyed the intricate equation. Then, turning to Sarah with unmistakable condescension, he extended the marker. Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate your sufficient mathematical competence by showing us how to solve it, Dr. Johnson. Or is history more your speed? The room fell completely silent. Everyone watched Sarah, many with embarrassment at the principal's obvious attempt to humiliate her. Ms. Hartley didn't bother hiding her smile of anticipation. Sarah looked at the equation, then at Principal Simmons, and finally at her fellow teachers. The moment of decision had arrived sooner than she'd expected, but perhaps it was time. With quiet dignity, she rose from her chair and walked to the whiteboard. Sarah accepted the marker from Principal Simmons, their eyes meeting briefly as the plastic cylinder passed between them. His expression held smug certainty, hers revealed nothing as she turned to face the whiteboard. The equation he had written was indeed complex, a multivariable differential equation with several integration requirements. It was clearly chosen to intimidate, to put her in her place before her colleagues. For a moment, Sarah stood silently, studying the problem. The room remained utterly quiet, the tension almost palpable as everyone waited for her inevitable struggle and embarrassment. Ms. Hartley's smile had widened in anticipation. Then Sarah began to write. Her hand moved across the board with confident precision, breaking down the equation into component parts, applying substitution techniques to simplify the expression. Her notation was elegant and efficient, each step flowing logically to the next with a mathematician's practiced grace. As she worked, murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Mr. Abernathy leaned forward, his expression shifting from concern to astonishment. Even Ms. Hartley's smile faded, replaced by confusion. Principal Simmons's face registered growing disbelief as Sarah continued solving the equation with obvious expertise. When she reached a critical juncture in the solution, she paused, turned slightly, and addressed the room without fully turning away from the board. There are actually two approaches we could take here, she explained calmly. The conventional method would proceed like this. She continued writing, completing the solution using standard techniques. Then she drew a line across the board and began again. However, there's a more elegant approach using a specialized version of Green's theorem that reduces the computational steps by nearly half. Her hand moved even more confidently now as she demonstrated the alternative solution, eventually arriving at the same answer but through a more sophisticated mathematical pathway. When she finished, she placed the marker down and turned to face her colleagues. Both methods yield the correct result, but the second approach reveals the underlying mathematical structure more clearly, she concluded. It's similar to how examining primary historical sources rather than just secondary summaries gives students deeper insight into historical events. The silence that followed was profound. Mr. Abernathy was the first to break it, shaking his head in wonder. That second method, I've never seen that application of Green's theorem before. That's graduate-level mathematics. Principal Simmons had gone pale, his earlier smugness replaced by shocked confusion. How did you? I don't understand. Sarah took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. Before I became a history teacher, I completed a PhD in mathematics at MIT, she stated simply. I specialized in differential geometry and worked as a research mathematician at Princeton for 8 years. I have 17 published papers in peer-reviewed journals and was part of a team that received the Steele Prize for Mathematical Innovation. Gasps and exclamations filled the room. Ms. Hartley's mouth hung open in disbelief. But, your application, your resume, Principal Simmons sputtered. You were hired as a history teacher. Yes, Sarah acknowledged. 2 years ago, my brother Marcus was killed in a car accident. He was a history professor who believed passionately that understanding the past is essential to building a better future. His death made me reevaluate my own career. I realized I wanted to honor his memory by teaching the subject he loved, while bringing my own mathematical perspective to historical analysis. She looked around at her stunned colleagues. I completed an accelerated certification in history education while taking a sabbatical from mathematics research. My qualifications in history are legitimate, if more recent than my mathematical credentials. Mr. Abernathy began to laugh, not mockingly, but with genuine delight. So all this time, when you've been integrating mathematical concepts into your history lessons. I've been drawing on my primary area of expertise, yes, Sarah finished for him. Mathematics and history aren't separate domains to me. They're complementary lenses for understanding patterns in human experience. Principal Simmons had dropped heavily into his chair, his expression unreadable as he struggled to process this revelation. The power dynamic in the room had shifted dramatically. Emily, the English teacher who had supported Sarah from the beginning, broke the awkward silence. Well, I think this calls for a revised approach to our departmental boundaries, don't you, Walter? The use of the principal's first name, unusual in such meetings, emphasized how thoroughly the normal hierarchy had been disrupted. Ms. Hartley, recovering from her shock, attempted to salvage something from the situation. This doesn't change the fact that Dr. Johnson has been undermining established disciplinary procedures and encouraging students to question authority. Actually, Sarah countered firmly, I've been advocating for legal and ethical treatment of students in accordance with state educational standards. My mathematical background has nothing to do with that, though it does allow me to statistically demonstrate the negative correlation between physical punishment and academic performance, if you'd like to see those calculations as well. Several teachers chuckled nervously at this, while Ms. Hartley's face flushed deep red. Principal Simmons finally found his voice. Why didn't you disclose your full academic background when you applied? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Because I wanted to be hired as a history teacher on the strength of my qualifications in that field, not because of my mathematics credentials. I didn't hide my background, my complete CV was included with my application. I simply emphasized the qualifications relevant to the position. Mr. Abernathy turned to Principal Simmons. This is an incredible opportunity, Walter. Do you realize what having someone of Dr. Johnson's caliber on our faculty means for our students? Principal Simmons nodded slowly, his expression gradually shifting from shock to calculation. Sarah could almost see him reassessing, determining how to turn this unexpected situation to his advantage. Indeed, he said, straightening his tie as he regained his composure. Westridge High is fortunate to have attracted such distinguished talent. Of course, I've always believed in supporting faculty members' diverse areas of expertise. The transparent attempt to reframe his previous position might have been amusing if not for what it revealed. Principal Simmons would adapt to protect his authority and reputation, but his fundamental concern remained image rather than educational quality. As the meeting broke up, teachers approached Sarah with questions and congratulations. Through it all, she maintained her poise, answering graciously but directing the conversation back to what mattered most, the students and their needs. Only as she was leaving did James Cooper's face flash in her mind. This victory felt significant, but the larger battle, for a school environment free from abusive discipline, remained unresolved. Her mathematical revelation had changed how her colleagues saw her, but would it be enough to change how the school treated its most vulnerable students? News of Sarah's mathematical prowess spread through Westridge High like wildfire. By lunchtime the day after the faculty meeting, students were approaching her in the hallways with a new kind of admiration in their eyes. Is it true you're some kind of math genius, Ms. J? James asked as he entered her classroom before fourth period. Sarah smiled. I wouldn't say genius, but yes, I did work as a mathematician before becoming a history teacher. And you solved a problem that Principal Simmons thought would stump you? Right in front of everyone. The excitement in his voice was palpable. Something like that, Sarah acknowledged, wondering exactly how the story had filtered down to the students. But James, my background doesn't change anything about our history class or what we're working on. Are you kidding? It changes everything. James exclaimed. It means you were right all along, and they were wrong to doubt you. His reaction gave Sarah pause. Being good at mathematics doesn't automatically make someone right about everything else, she cautioned. What matters is evidence, reasoning, and treating people with dignity, in any subject. James nodded, but his expression remained triumphant. As other students filtered in, Sarah noticed a new energy in the room, a combination of excitement and respect that hadn't been there before. After school, Principal Simmons requested another meeting with Sarah. When she entered his office, she found him noticeably more deferential than in their previous interactions. Dr. Johnson, he began, after yesterday's revelation, I've been giving considerable thought to how we might better utilize your unique skill set at Westridge. I'm listening, Sarah replied neutrally. Superintendent Roberts is extremely interested in your cross-disciplinary approach. In fact, she suggested we develop a special program under your guidance, perhaps an honors track that integrates mathematical analysis with historical study. Sarah recognized the olive branch for what it was, an attempt to co-opt her success rather than continue opposing her. That could benefit our students, she acknowledged. But I'm more concerned about addressing the disciplinary issues we've discussed previously. Has there been any progress on that front? Principal Simmons's expression tightened momentarily before he forced a smile. These things take time. The disciplinary committee is reviewing our policies, as I mentioned earlier. And in the meantime, students like James Cooper continue to suffer physical and emotional consequences. Dr. Johnson, Principal Simmons said, his tone hardening slightly, your mathematical credentials are impressive, but they don't grant you authority over school-wide disciplinary procedures. Some traditions are deeply ingrained in our community's expectations. Illegal practices aren't traditions worth preserving, Sarah countered. And speaking of my mathematical background, I've been compiling some interesting data. She removed a folder from her bag and placed it on his desk. This is a statistical analysis of academic performance trends among students who have received physical punishment compared to those who haven't. The correlation is quite striking, and not in favor of your traditional methods. Principal Simmons glanced at the graphs without touching the folder. Data can be interpreted in many ways. Yes, Sarah agreed. That's why I've included multiple analytical approaches and controlled for various factors. The results are consistent across all methods. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. The school secretary poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a Mrs. Cooper on line 1. She says it's urgent, something about her son James. After the secretary left, Principal Simmons sighed heavily. It seems our conversation will have to continue another time, Dr. Johnson. As Sarah gathered her materials to leave, he added, I hope you understand that while your mathematical expertise is valued, this school operates as a hierarchy. Major changes require proper procedures and consensus among leadership. Of course, Sarah replied, pausing at the door. Just as mathematical proofs require rigorous verification. But once the truth is established, denying it becomes untenable, regardless of hierarchy. The following day brought unexpected developments. James was absent from Sarah's fourth period class. During lunch, Emily sought her out with concerning news. James Cooper's mother came to school this morning, she explained in a low voice. Apparently, Ms. Hartley struck him again yesterday, hard enough to leave marks on his arm. His mother took photos and is threatening legal action against the school. Sarah felt a cold anger rising within her. This has gone too far. What's being done? Principal Simmons is in emergency meetings with the district's legal counsel, Emily replied. And get this, the superintendent is coming personally this afternoon. By the end of the day, the atmosphere at Westridge had shifted dramatically. Ms. Hartley was nowhere to be seen, and whispers circulated that she had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 3 days later, Superintendent Roberts called a special faculty meeting. The tall, imposing woman stood beside Principal Simmons, whose usual confidence seemed diminished. As many of you are aware, Superintendent Roberts began, serious allegations have been made regarding disciplinary practices at Westridge High. The district has initiated a formal investigation into all reported incidents of corporal punishment, which I must emphasize is explicitly prohibited by state education law. She surveyed the room with sharp eyes. During this investigation, any faculty member implicated in these practices will be placed on administrative leave. Principal Simmons will continue his administrative duties but will work alongside an associate principal appointed by the district to ensure complete compliance with all regulations. Principal Simmons stared straight ahead, his expression carefully neutral despite this public diminishment of his authority. Additionally, the superintendent continued, we will be implementing new training on positive disciplinary approaches for all staff. Dr. Johnson has graciously offered to share her research on the correlation between disciplinary methods and academic outcomes, which will inform our approach moving forward. After the meeting, several teachers who had previously kept their distance approached Sarah to share their own concerns about the school's disciplinary culture. Stories emerged of other students who had been physically punished, of parents who had complained only to be dismissed, of a system that protected itself at the expense of the children it was meant to serve. I knew it was wrong, one teacher confessed. But Ms. Hartley had been here forever, and Principal Simmons always backed her up. I didn't feel I could speak out alone. You're not alone now, Sarah assured them. This is our opportunity to create the school our students deserve. As she packed up to leave, Sarah found James Cooper waiting in the hallway outside her classroom. "My mom told me what's happening," he said. "About the investigation and everything." "How are you feeling about it?" Sarah asked gently. James shrugged. "Weird, I guess. Like, good that something's finally happening, but also kind of scared. Ms. Hartley has friends here, you know. And Principal Simmons isn't happy about any of this." "Change is rarely comfortable," Sarah acknowledged. "But sometimes it's necessary. What you did, telling the truth about what happened to you, took real courage. I wouldn't have done it if you hadn't shown me it was possible to stand up to them," James admitted. "You solved that impossible math problem and didn't back down. Made me think maybe I could be brave too." Sarah felt a sudden rush of emotion at his words. Sometimes the hardest problems, whether in mathematics or in life, require us to question assumptions and try new approaches. You've helped start an important change here, James. As they parted ways, Sarah reflected on how her unexpected journey from mathematician to history teacher had led her to this pivotal moment. The investigation was just beginning, and challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, but the atmosphere of fear that had pervaded Westridge High had begun to lift, replaced by something that felt remarkably like hope. The district's investigation proceeded swiftly. Over 2 weeks, investigators interviewed dozens of students, teachers, and parents about disciplinary practices at Westridge High. Sarah provided her statistical analysis, demonstrating the negative correlation between physical punishment and academic performance, particularly among already struggling students. As findings began to emerge, tensions at the school intensified. Faculty members divided into factions, those supporting the investigation and those defending traditional methods. Principal Simmons maintained a facade of cooperation while subtly encouraging resistance, suggesting the investigation was an overreaction to isolated incidents. 3 weeks after the investigation began, the superintendent scheduled a special school board meeting to address the preliminary findings. The evening of the meeting, the board room was packed with teachers, parents, and community members. Sarah arrived early, settling into a seat near the front where she could observe all the participants. Principal Simmons entered with his attorney, his typically confident stride now stiff with tension. Ms. Hartley was present as well, sitting separately with her own legal representation. When James Cooper arrived with his mother, a tall, elegant woman with the same determined expression as her son, Sarah gave them an encouraging nod. At precisely 7 p.m., Superintendent Roberts called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, the district has been investigating allegations of prohibited disciplinary practices at Westridge High School. Tonight, we'll present our preliminary findings and hear from key stakeholders before the board determines next steps." The lead investigator, a former education attorney named Dr. Ramirez, presented first. Using carefully anonymized accounts, she detailed a pattern of corporal punishment that had become normalized at Westridge under Principal Simmons's leadership. "Our investigation identified 17 confirmed incidents of physical punishment over the past academic year alone," Dr. Ramirez reported. These incidents involved 3 faculty members, with the majority attributed to a single teacher. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew she was referring primarily to Ms. Hartley. More concerning than the incidents themselves, she continued, was the systematic dismissal of parent and student complaints about these practices. Documentation shows that Principal Simmons characterized these complaints as exaggerations and frequently intimidated parents into dropping their concerns. Principal Simmons shifted uncomfortably, whispering something to his attorney. Next came the district psychologist, who presented research on the psychological impact of physical punishment in educational settings. Students subjected to these practices show higher rates of school avoidance, increased anxiety, and diminished academic performance, she explained. The emotional trauma can persist long after the physical pain subsides. When Sarah was called to present her analysis, she approached the podium with quiet confidence. She had prepared meticulously for this moment, knowing that mathematical precision could cut through emotional defenses in ways that testimonials alone might not. "Good evening. I'm Dr. Sarah Johnson, currently teaching history at Westridge High, with a background in mathematical research. I've analyzed academic performance data for Westridge students over the past 3 years, specifically examining performance patterns before and after documented disciplinary incidents. She displayed a series of graphs on the projection screen. These charts demonstrate a consistent pattern. Following physical disciplinary measures, student performance declines by an average of 17% in the subsequent marking period. This effect is most pronounced in mathematics and science courses, which require sustained confidence and concentration. Sarah then presented a second set of data. For comparison, I've analyzed results from classrooms employing positive disciplinary approaches. These show no such decline. In fact, many students demonstrate improved performance when classroom management focuses on support rather than punishment. The board members leaned forward, studying the projections intently. One asked, could other factors explain these correlations? A valid question, Sarah acknowledged. That's why I controlled for variables including prior academic history, socioeconomic factors, and classroom environment. The correlation persists across all demographic groups and subject areas, strongly suggesting a causal relationship. After Sarah's presentation, several parents spoke about their children's experiences. Mrs. Cooper's testimony was particularly powerful, as she displayed photographs documenting the bruises on James's arm and described how her previous complaints had been dismissed by Principal Simmons. "My son was physically abused at school, the one place he should have been safe," Mrs. Cooper stated firmly. "When I raised concerns, I was told I was overreacting and that these were standard disciplinary measures. There is nothing standard about hitting a child hard enough to leave marks that last for days." Throughout these testimonies, Ms. Hartley grew increasingly agitated, whispering furiously to her attorney. When she was finally invited to respond, she rose with righteous indignation. "What we're witnessing tonight is nothing short of an attack on educational standards," she declared. "For 30 years, I have maintained discipline in my classroom to ensure students receive the quality education they deserve. What some call physical punishment, I call meaningful consequences that prepare young people for a world that won't coddle them." She gestured dismissively toward Sarah. "Dr. Johnson's fancy charts and graphs can't measure character development or respect for authority, values that seem increasingly absent in today's permissive educational culture." Principal Simmons spoke next, adopting a more measured tone. "While I respect the concerns raised tonight, I believe they represent a fundamental misunderstanding of Westridge High's educational philosophy. Our approach to discipline has produced generations of successful graduates who appreciate the structure and high expectations that define their education." He turned to face the board directly. "If some disciplinary incidents crossed appropriate boundaries, those should certainly be addressed. But dismantling a system that has served our community well for decades would be a grave mistake based on isolated incidents and theoretical research." The tension in the room was palpable as Superintendent Roberts invited final comments. Sarah found herself rising once more, moved by an urgent need to counter the narrative being constructed. "May I respond briefly?" she requested, and was granted permission to return to the podium. "Principal Simmons speaks of a system that has served our community well," Sarah began, her voice calm but intense. "But we must ask, which members of our community has it served, and at what cost to others? The data doesn't show isolated incidents, it reveals a pattern of harm disproportionately affecting our most vulnerable students." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "As educators, our primary obligation is to create environments where all students can learn safely and with dignity. This isn't about permissiveness versus structure, it's about recognizing that humiliation and physical pain are educational failures, not tools." Sarah met Principal Simmons's gaze directly. "We can maintain high expectations without resorting to practices that would be classified as assault in any context outside a school building. Our students deserve better, and the law demands it." As she returned to her seat, murmurs rippled through the audience. The school board president called for a brief recess before deliberations, and people broke into buzzing conversations throughout the room. James Cooper made his way to Sarah's side. "That was amazing," he said quietly. "The way you used math to prove what we all knew was happening, they couldn't just dismiss it as complaints from problem students." "That was the idea," Sarah replied with a small smile. Numbers don't have biases or agendas, they simply reflect patterns. And the pattern here is clear. When the board reconvened 30 minutes later, the president announced their decision. Based on the evidence presented tonight, the board has determined that immediate action is required to address the serious concerns raised about disciplinary practices at Westridge High. She outlined a comprehensive plan. Ms. Hartley and the other implicated teachers would remain on administrative leave pending further investigation. Principal Simmons would undergo leadership counseling and supervision. A new disciplinary framework emphasizing restorative practices would be implemented throughout the district, and most significantly, an oversight committee including teachers, parents, and students would be established to ensure compliance with ethical and legal standards. Additionally, the board president concluded, the board wishes to recognize Dr. Sarah Johnson for her courage in bringing these issues to light and for her valuable contribution to understanding their impact. Her commitment to student welfare exemplifies the highest standards of educational professionalism. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that action was being taken, concern for the challenging transition ahead, but most of all, hope that Westridge High might become a place where students like James could truly thrive. Outside in the parking lot, Superintendent Roberts approached Sarah. "That was impressive work in there, Dr. Johnson. Not many teachers would have risked their position to advocate so persistently for change." "It wasn't about risk," Sarah replied honestly. "It was about doing what was right for our students." The superintendent nodded thoughtfully. "We need more of that perspective in our leadership. Once things settle, I'd like to discuss potential opportunities for you at the district level. Your combined expertise in mathematics and history, along with your evident commitment to student welfare, could be invaluable in curriculum development." As Sarah drove home that night, she reflected on how far things had come since that first day she'd noticed James standing at the back of her classroom. A mathematical proof began with axioms and proceeded through logical steps to reach a conclusion. In much the same way, addressing injustice required starting with basic principles of human dignity and following the evidence wherever it led, regardless of established hierarchies or traditions. The proof, in this case, was far from complete. But tonight had marked a critical step toward a more just conclusion. In the weeks following the school board meeting, Westridge High entered a period of significant transition. The district's full investigation confirmed and expanded upon the preliminary findings, documenting a years-long pattern of prohibited disciplinary practices that had been systematically concealed from district oversight. Ms. Hartley, faced with overwhelming evidence and potential legal consequences, submitted her resignation rather than face termination proceedings. 2 other teachers implicated in physical punishment incidents were placed on extended probation and required to complete comprehensive training on positive classroom management techniques. For Principal Simmons, the consequences were more complex. While the investigation didn't find that he had personally engaged in corporal punishment, it documented extensive evidence of his role in enabling and covering up these practices. The school board ultimately decided against termination but imposed strict conditions. He would work under close district supervision for 1 academic year, complete leadership training focused on ethical administration, and implement a comprehensive reform of school disciplinary policies with regular progress reports to the board. The most immediate and visible change came in the form of the new Disciplinary Oversight Committee, composed of teachers, parents, and student representatives. Sarah was asked to serve as the faculty chair, a position she accepted with both determination and a sense of responsibility. "The goal isn't punitive," she explained during the committee's first meeting. "We're building a system that maintains appropriate structure while ensuring every student is treated with dignity and respect." James Cooper, now serving as one of the student representatives, had grown increasingly confident in sharing his perspective. "It's weird to think that a few months ago, I was afraid to even report what happened to me," he admitted during a discussion. "Now I'm helping make rules about how discipline should work." "That's exactly why student voices are essential to this process," Sarah replied. "You understand the impact of these policies in ways that adults sometimes forget." Beyond her committee work, Sarah found her professional role expanding in unexpected ways. With the math department still short-staffed following Mrs. Patel's maternity leave, she was asked to teach an advanced calculus class alongside her history courses, an arrangement that came to be known informally as the Johnson exception to departmental boundaries. Her calculus students were initially skeptical about taking a class with the history teacher, but her mathematical expertise quickly won them over. Soon, students were requesting transfers into her sections, drawn by her reputation for making complex concepts accessible through clear explanations and real-world applications. One Tuesday afternoon, Principal Simmons observed her calculus class, part of his mandated self-improvement process. After watching Sarah guide students through a challenging unit on multivariable calculus, he lingered after the bell. "I must admit, Dr. Johnson, your teaching methods are quite effective," he acknowledged with visible effort. The students seemed genuinely engaged with material that most would find intimidating. "Mathematical concepts become less intimidating when students understand the underlying patterns," Sarah replied. "It's not so different from how we approach historical patterns in my other classes." Principal Simmons nodded stiffly. "Yes, well, the district is quite pleased with your dual role. Superintendent Roberts mentions your innovative approach at every leadership meeting." Sarah recognized the comment for what it was, not genuine enthusiasm for educational innovation, but acknowledgement of a political reality. Principal Simmons was adapting to protect his position, learning to publicly embrace changes he privately resisted. "Change is difficult," Sarah offered, neither confrontational nor condescending. "But I believe Westridge will be stronger for it." "Perhaps," he conceded before departing, his posture still rigid with unresolved resentment. Not everyone shared Principal Simmons's reluctance to evolve. Many faculty members, particularly younger teachers who had felt constrained by the previous culture, embraced the school's new direction. Collaborative teaching initiatives emerged, crossing traditional departmental lines. The math and science departments began working with humanities teachers to develop integrated curriculum units that approached topics from multiple disciplinary perspectives. Most rewarding for Sarah was the transformation she witnessed in James Cooper. No longer forced to stand through classes due to physical pain, he had become an active, engaged student. His mathematical abilities, which had been overshadowed by his struggles in other areas, began to flourish under Sarah's guidance. "Have you thought about joining the math team next year?" she asked him after he'd aced a particularly challenging test. "You have a natural aptitude for this." James looked surprised. "Me? On the math team? I've always been more of a history guy." Sarah smiled. "Who says you can't be both? Some of history's greatest mathematicians were also philosophers, artists, and historians. Human curiosity doesn't confine itself to neat categories." One afternoon in late spring, Sarah was reviewing final exam preparations when Superintendent Roberts visited her classroom. "I hope I'm not interrupting," the superintendent said. "Not at all," Sarah assured her. "Just organizing materials for exam review sessions." Always the dedicated teacher, Superintendent Roberts observed with approval. "That's actually related to why I'm here. The district is creating a new position, Director of Integrated Curriculum Development. The role would involve building cross-disciplinary approaches throughout our schools, breaking down the artificial barriers between subject areas." She handed Sarah a folder. "I'd like you to consider applying. Your background makes you uniquely qualified, and your work here at Westridge has demonstrated the impact of integrated teaching methods." Sarah accepted the folder with mixed emotions. "I'm honored by your confidence, but I've grown attached to my students here. Leaving the classroom would be difficult. The position would still involve some teaching, demonstration lessons and collaborative development with teachers," the superintendent explained. "But I understand your hesitation. Take some time to consider it." That evening, Sarah pondered the opportunity while grading papers. As if summoned by her thoughts, an email arrived from James Cooper's mother. "Dr. Johnson, I wanted to share some news that wouldn't have been possible without your advocacy. James has been accepted into Princeton's summer mathematics program for high school students. The confidence he's gained this year, both academically and personally, has transformed him." When asked to write about a significant influence in his application essay, he wrote about you and how you showed him that standing up for what's right requires both courage and methodical evidence. Thank you for being the teacher he needed. Sarah read the message twice, feeling a surge of pride and purpose. Whatever path she chose moving forward, whether continuing as a classroom teacher or moving into curriculum development, she had discovered a truth as elegant as any mathematical proof: education at its best was never merely about transmitting information, but about empowering students to find their own voices and navigate their own paths with confidence and integrity. The school year was ending, but the transformation of Westridge High, and of all those who had participated in that transformation, was just beginning. 1 year later, Westridge High School barely resembled its former self. The physical building remained unchanged, the same brick facade, the same wide corridors, the same classrooms with their worn linoleum floors, but the spirit within those walls had undergone a profound metamorphosis. Sarah stood in her classroom, now adorned with both historical timelines and mathematical models, preparing for the final faculty meeting of the academic year. She had ultimately declined the district-level position, choosing instead to remain in the classroom while taking on a new role as Westridge's coordinator of integrated studies, a position created specifically to leverage her unique skill set. The disciplinary reforms had taken root throughout the school. Physical punishment was now firmly relegated to Westridge's past, replaced by a restorative justice approach that emphasized accountability and growth rather than punishment. Student attendance had improved, disciplinary incidents had decreased, and most telling of all, academic performance had risen across all departments. Principal Simmons had also evolved, though in his case the transformation was more complex. The leadership training and supervision had forced him to confront long-held assumptions about authority and control. While he would never be the progressive educational visionary some might have hoped for, he had learned to listen more and dictate less, a change that even his critics acknowledged as significant. As Sarah gathered her materials for the meeting, James Cooper appeared in her doorway. No longer the hesitant student who stood at the back of her classroom, he carried himself with confidence, his posture straight and his eyes bright with purpose. "Big meeting today, right, Dr. J?" he asked, stepping into the room. Now a junior and president of the newly formed Student Advisory Council, James had become a respected voice in school governance. "Indeed," Sarah replied with a smile. "End-of-year assessment and planning for next fall. The integrated mathematics and history curriculum is on the agenda." James nodded. "That's actually why I stopped by. The council put together some student feedback on the integrated classes." He handed her a neatly organized folder. "Spoiler alert, it's overwhelmingly positive." Sarah accepted the folder gratefully. Student perspectives are the most important measure of success. "Thank you for gathering this." "It's the least I could do," James said, a hint of emotion in his voice. "You know, I was thinking about next year, my senior year, and how different things are now. Last year at this time, I couldn't even sit down in class without pain." "You've come a long way," Sarah acknowledged. "We all have." "Yeah, but it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't stood up to them. If you hadn't been, you." Sarah shook her head slightly. "It wasn't just me, James. It was you having the courage to tell your story. It was your mother advocating for you. It was every student and teacher who knew something was wrong but needed someone to speak first." "Still," James insisted, "it all started when you noticed me standing in the back of your class and actually cared enough to ask why." The faculty meeting that afternoon had none of the tension that had characterized such gatherings in the past. Teachers from different departments shared successes and challenges, building on each other's ideas rather than defending territorial boundaries. Principal Simmons, while still formal in his manner, facilitated rather than dominated the discussion. When it came time to discuss the Integrated Curriculum Initiative, Sarah presented the findings from the first year of implementation: higher engagement, improved retention of complex concepts, and stronger critical thinking skills across subject areas. "What's particularly encouraging," she noted, "is how this approach has benefited students who previously struggled in traditional single-subject formats. By seeing the connections between disciplines, they've developed more holistic understanding." The mathematics department chair, who had initially been skeptical of the integrated approach, offered his support. "I've seen students who claim to hate math become enthusiastic when they understand its application to historical analysis or scientific discovery. Dr. Johnson's approach hasn't diluted mathematical rigor, it's enhanced its meaning." As the meeting concluded, Principal Simmons made a surprising announcement. Before we adjourn, I have some personal news to share. After considerable reflection, I've decided to retire at the end of next academic year. Murmurs rippled through the faculty as he continued, "The past year has taught me valuable lessons about educational leadership and the importance of adaptation. I believe Westridge High is moving in a positive direction, and new leadership will bring fresh energy to continue that journey." His gaze settled briefly on Sarah before addressing the entire room. "Change is indeed difficult, as some of you have heard me acknowledge, but it is also necessary. I've come to appreciate that truth, however belatedly." The following week, on the last day of classes, Sarah taught her final integrated lesson of the year, a session examining how mathematical modeling had influenced historical understanding of economic systems from feudalism to modern capitalism. James sat in the front row, actively participating and helping to guide class discussion. In the back of the room, Superintendent Roberts observed quietly, having developed a habit of dropping in on Sarah's classes for inspiration on district-wide reforms. When the final bell rang, students gathered around Sarah's desk to wish her a good summer, many expressing excitement about continuing in her advanced courses the following year. After the classroom emptied, Superintendent Roberts approached. "Every time I visit, I'm more convinced that this model needs to be expanded district-wide," she said. "Your students don't just learn history and mathematics, they learn how to think across boundaries." "That's the goal," Sarah agreed. "Knowledge doesn't exist in isolation. Neither should education. I wanted to let you know that the board has approved funding for 5 more integrated curriculum positions for next year," the superintendent continued. "And given Principal Simmons's retirement announcement, I hope you'll consider applying for the principalship when it opens." Sarah looked surprised. "Me? As principal?" "You've demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership Westridge needs, principled, innovative, and student-centered," Superintendent Roberts explained. "Just something to consider over the summer." As Sarah packed up her classroom for the break, she reflected on the journey of the past year. She had come to Westridge seeking to honor her brother's memory by teaching the subject he loved, never imagining she would become a catalyst for institutional transformation. The classroom door opened once more, and James Cooper stepped in with his mother. "We wanted to say goodbye before summer," Mrs. Cooper explained. "And to thank you again. James received his official acceptance to the Princeton summer program today." "That's wonderful news," Sarah exclaimed. James grinned. "They were especially interested in my essay about integrated learning approaches and how understanding mathematical patterns helps us interpret historical trends. Sound familiar?" "Suspiciously so," Sarah laughed. "Dr. Johnson," Mrs. Cooper said earnestly, "before you came to Westridge, my son was losing his love of learning. Now he's thriving academically and standing up for himself and others. That transformation doesn't happen without teachers who care enough to challenge broken systems." After they left, Sarah stood in her empty classroom, gazing at the space that had become the epicenter of unexpected change. On her desk sat the framed quote she had placed there on her first day, words from her brother that had guided her transition from mathematician to history teacher: "The past teaches us patterns. Understanding those patterns is our best hope for creating a better future." She had brought mathematical precision to historical analysis, but more importantly, she had brought courage to a place where it was desperately needed. In doing so, she had helped students like James discover their own courage, perhaps the most important lesson of all. As Principal Simmons had reluctantly learned, as the faculty had gradually embraced, and as Sarah had always believed, education at its best was never static. Like mathematics, it required constant questioning of assumptions. Like history, it demanded honest reckoning with past failures to build toward better futures. Sarah switched off the lights and closed her classroom door, ready for whatever new challenges the next chapter would bring. Dear friend, this story reminds us that standing up against injustice often requires both courage and evidence. Physical punishment has no place in modern education. It harms students academically and emotionally while teaching that violence is an acceptable way to resolve problems. Every child deserves to learn in an environment where they are treated with dignity and respect. If you witness or experience mistreatment in educational settings, speak up. Real change happens when brave individuals like Dr. Sarah Johnson refuse to accept that's just how things are done. If you were moved by this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that highlights important social issues. Together, we can create a world where all students can thrive in safe, supportive learning environments.